Hi everyone, my name is Paco Chow and today I'm going to be talking to you about collective decision making in cockroach groups. Animal groups make very complex decisions in a self-organizing manner. One example we will focus on is shelter selection in cockroach groups. As we can see in the video, groups of cockroaches will aggregate under one shelter, and in fact, simply through local interactions between individuals, they're able to collectively find dark shelters that best fit their group size. Now, unfortunately, most experimental setups had been done with just two shelters. So a target T, a good option, and a distractor D, representing a mediocre option. So for example, here we have a distractor shelter that is too large. Now the question is, what happens if we increase the number of shelters? And what we're interested in is how the decision-making dynamics change as the complexity of the decision increases. So we're going to use a very simple setup where we have one good option, which is represented by this dark circle, and n-1 mediocre shelters that are too large, represented by these lighter circles. Now cockroaches can be under any of these shelters or be in an uncommitted state, and xi is the number of individuals under each shelter. So we're going to model this process mathematically because I'm too lazy to do experiments. But essentially we can express the change in xi over time with this master equation. So we have recruitment term in blue, where the probability of entering a shelter depends on the number of options, how crowded the shelter is, and the number of uncommitted individuals. And then we have a leaving term in red, and what's important here is the rate of leaving, is that the rate of leaving a shelter is determined by the density of cockroaches under the shelter. And so we have our SI as the shelter size, and so XI over SI is our density term, meaning that the more cockroaches are under a shelter, the less likely the cockroaches are to leave. Now what we find is that the model predicts two distinct processing regimes depending on the number of options. So let me break this down. When we simulate the model with two large distractors, we can plot the change in the proportion of individuals under each shelter over time, and you can see that the group readily finds the target shelter. Now, one important measurement that we will make is the time it takes to reach 95% of the final proportion at the target shelter, which we call T95, and this is a measure of the decision time of the group. And what we're going to do is we're going to examine how the T95 value changes as we increase the number of options. Now what we see is that as you increase the number of options, there's this interesting decrease in decision time before it increases again, suggesting this transition in processing regimes as you increase the number of options. Now this increase in decision time makes sense because it gets progressively harder to find the target option as you increase the number of options. But the question is, why do we see this decrease? And it's quite a counterintuitive property of this system. So I'm going to try to explain this with a schematic. Let's say here on the left we have the case where we have only two options, one target and one distractor, a large distractor. And on the right we have a target shelter with three large distractors. Now initially all cockroaches are uncommitted and all of the shelters are empty. The cockroaches first explore all shelters roughly equally, and so the group gets split roughly evenly into each shelter. Now this means that when there are three distractors, each distractor is actually less able to retain individuals, meaning that more cockroaches will leave the distractors. And this results in a faster elimination of these distractors, resulting in a lower T95, so decision time. So this is a novel prediction of how collective decision-making dynamics scale with how complex the problem is, and it's something that can be tested empirically to validate the results of the model. And what's great about this framework is that it allows us to understand how different types of local interactions result in the emergence of different group-level decision-making properties. And with that, I'd like to thank my advisors, Simone Garnier and Horacio Rotstein, as well as the rest of the Swarm Lab, and thank you all for listening.